Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Gaming Hatman here, and if you have been reading the news lately on the internet, you would have seen that Nintendo have sued the websites LoveRoms and Love Retro and caused them to shut down due to obviously suing them for millions of dollars. As a result, this seems to be scaring other ROM sites now who are also doing obviously ROMs. For example, Emu Paradise in the last couple of days have now removed all ROMs from their websites, which is very, very sad when you think about it. Obviously by now we all know the legalities surrounding these ROMs, and if you do not already own a copy of a game, then in all technicalities, if you download a ROM of the game and play it, you are committing piracy. Yeah, how very naughty. So, with regards to this, is this ethical though for Nintendo to have done this? And more importantly for them, is it even a good business decision in the first place? As we all know, piracy is rampant, and it always has been, to be honest. For example, music is illegally downloaded online, videos, bloody everything, I suppose. But with gaming, it's a little bit different to the others because the gaming industry and games publishers in particular have done an absolutely diabolical job over the years of giving players the options to legally buy and procure older games. Let's look at Nintendo themselves, for example. They're some of the worst culprits around when it comes to giving people the options to get their older games. Like, let's look at the Switch, for example. At the moment, they've not even got the virtual console on there where you can have any option to download these old Nintendo games. Like, that's a joke, isn't it? For example, I thought it was really good back in around 2006-2007 when they first opened the Wii eShop and you could suddenly once again buy legally copies of games for the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo 64, etc. One assumed that you would just be able to transfer these purchases from one generation to the next. But for some reason, Nintendo have failed to give its consumers those options. But it's not so much just about the games you could legally play using these services. The majority of ROMs have never reappeared on these eShops to begin with anyway. Even when looking at Nintendo games themselves rather than just third-party games, their entire Nintendo Satellaview library has never surfaced again ever since that platform's release. And even back then, none of the games for the Satellaview was ever released in a physical manner. So, there's literally never been any way to play these games up until this point without using ROMs, which have basically been put online by the likes of fans. Fans have given us the only way to enjoy the majority of Nintendo products of the past. As I said, they have just done such a bad job of giving us options as consumers. And come to think of it as well, there is a vast array of games they've not even bothered translating from one region to another. Let's mention Mother 3, a game which fans have been reading about and screeching about wanting an official release forever, and Nintendo have just not bothered giving it to the fans. So, once again, the fans have gone out of their way, translated it themselves and put a ROM of the game online. That is the only way for someone to play the game who cannot speak Japanese but can speak just English instead. You can play the fan translation. And come to think of it, there's nothing wrong with that. No harm is actually being done whatsoever because Nintendo have chosen not to monetize that product in the region. So therefore you are not taking any money from them in the first place. Therefore you are doing absolutely nothing ethically wrong in any way. For me personally, ROMs have been very useful over time. Personally now, I have procured over 3,000 different physical games amongst my large collection I have at home. But these days, before I ever make a purchase, I like to try out the ROM of the game first. Retro games are very, very expensive now. So before I fork out a large sum of money for one of these games, I like to actually see if I like it first. Another annoying thing about Nintendo's downloadable services is you're obviously paying for something what's digital only, meaning you are buying something and if you don't like it, you have no possible way of selling it on. You are literally throwing your money down the toilet if you have an unenjoyable experience. So that's another thing what's wrong with all of this. If you are buying something digital, there should be an option to return it if you do not like it. Like, let's look at Steam, for example. Steam have got the right idea with this sort of thing. If you buy a game on Steam and you do not like the game, you get a refund straight away. For some reason, I've not seen Nintendo offer this option on any of their digital services. Another reason why these digital services are so diabolically poor, and another reason why you would prefer to use a ROM over one of their official ways of playing a game, because their official ways of emulated don't quite cut the mustard yet, unfortunately. So overall, Nintendo over the years have done an absolutely awful job of allowing their fans a legal way to play old games retrospectively. In fact, it's been completely up to the fans in order to archive these games digitally, because there has been little in the way of Nintendo actually being able to do this themselves. There's even a rumour going around on the information superhighway that when they recently released the arcade version of Versus Super Mario Bros. Onto the Nintendo Switch, that Nintendo never apparently had the game ready at all for that device. Instead, they just had to go online, download a ROM of the game, which a fan had made, and then start selling that in their bloody eShop. That's how behind with the times Nintendo are, ladies and gentlemen. To be honest, Nintendo have always had a history of being overly conservative and overly protectionist when it comes to their business. And often this ends up being detrimental to their profits overall. Let's look at the Nintendo 64 very briefly, for example. That system should have been an absolutely amazing platform, but unfortunately they gimped it from the moment it was released by using those god-awful cartridges as a format to play the games on. Yes, they was fast, ladies and gentlemen, but they was extremely limited in storage capabilities, which meant that developers could only make small games on the platform in comparison to what they could fit on the CDs of that of the PlayStation at the time. Apart from that as well, there was the production costs. It would have cost developers far more money to buy their horrible cartridges than it would have to just simply buy CDs. It just didn't make sense, did it? They've always done that. Then the next generation, the GameCube as well. You've got the same problem. Those stupid, horrible mini discs, which had far less storage on them than a regular DVD, which you got for the PlayStation 2. Two storage mediums that lacked, specifically just because they was a little bit terrified of piracy. They've always been over the top scared about this medium, and I don't really understand it, because the other companies have not taken these extreme measures when it comes to their games. Look at Sony, for example. They have not gone to any of these extreme measures, and over the years, on the whole, they have been outperforming Nintendo since their inception within the console market. So if Sony don't need to do all these ridiculous things, why do Nintendo feel the need to be doing this themselves? They've always been a little bit nefarious, to be fair, haven't they? So once again, I'm going to go as far as to say this closure of ROM sites could actually end up affecting their businesses in a detrimental manner. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's try and imagine this awful, disgusting, dystopian future in which Nintendo would strongly like to create. A world where on the internet it becomes extremely difficult to procure ROMs of old games. The same old games in which Nintendo saw up until recently as no more than disposable fads. Games which they made a large amount of money off in the past, but saw them as no more than quick cash grabs with no long-term future to monetize, which is why they've not really done anything about this ROM problem right up until this very day, the day in which they can finally see that a lot of people are interested in playing these older games now that the genre of gaming is becoming more of a serious entertainment medium. For Nintendo, they're exactly the same as any other corporate company. They are not so concerned with ethics unless those ethics drive profit. Nintendo's only concern is to make as much profit as possible. So with them suing all of these companies and potentially, well not potentially, literally trying to get ROMs removed from the internet, if this ever became the case, would this be a good business move for them? Personally, I think the answer to this question could possibly be no, as if these ROMs became more difficult to source, then others, real proper pirates, would find a way of monetizing this situation. You can already go on eBay today and find a variety of scumbags attempting to sell CDs stuffed full of ROMs and attempting to sell them to the general public. So, if ROMs became hard to source, then more members of the general public would waste their disposable income in paying these pirates instead of spending their money on new games offered by Nintendo. So therefore, they would be losing potential money which could have been spent on them. Thinking about it, it's not even the pirates which would become the main concern with regards to losing profit with regards to this scenario. The main issue would be if the ROMs are not available to play of these games, either be it on one of Nintendo's services or via an illegal download source, then people would be forced to fork out huge sums of money for physical games. I already do spend large amounts of money on physical media these days, so that's big, isn't it? Say for example someone wants to play a game and it's not available on any service, then they're going to pay the £300 or whatever it is to get that digital download. That £300 is a huge amount of money in which someone could have been spending on brand new games offered by Nintendo. This could be astronomically bad for them in the long run. So yes, I suppose the less options that we end up receiving in which you could play these games would mean that people would end up relying on physical media further and further, therefore meaning that people will be spending more money on these older titles rather than spending their money on actual new official Nintendo products, which long term could in fact end up blocking the entire market. The less money you've got coming into the pot would mean we would get less and less big Nintendo games down the line in the future. So with regards to this situation, it seems to be the same old Nintendo crap, where they have decided to cut off their own nose to spite their own face. It seems to be a rather common trope of the company over the years. So ladies and gentlemen, let us know in the comment section what you think of this entire fiasco and whether or not you agree with me, whether long term you believe that basically making these ROMs harder to access could potentially affect Nintendo's profit margins. I'd be curious to hear from you. Cheerio!